Pressure is mounting on law enforcement across the nation as protests call for reform.
Robert Harris, director of LAPD Union, the Los Angeles Police Protective League, joins us live this morning. Good morning.
Robert, good morning, and thanks for joining us.
No, thank you very much for having me.
The LAPD is the third largest force in the U.S., just behind New York City and Chicago. LA City Council is proposing replacing some officers with an unarmed crisis response team. What role does the police union have in the calls for reform?
Well, I think the Los Angeles Police Protective League has been at the forefront of calls for reform, whether it was our call for a national reform over the last several weeks, where we joined with San Jose and San Francisco, or whether it was our leading efforts in Sacramento last year that helped establish some legislation that was landmark related to reform and use of force policies for agencies throughout the state. So we've been a collaborative partner in this from the beginning, and we'd like to continue to be.
And you just mentioned, along with the Los Angeles Police Protective League, you guys teamed up with San Jose and San Francisco about the changes that the union would like to see. What are those changes?
Yeah, I think one thing that the public at large may not be aware of is a lot of the reforms that have been talked about across the country have already been in place here in Los Angeles for a long time. And in San Francisco and San Jose, they worked well for us. LAPD has seen a reduction in officer-involved shootings over the last 4 years. We're at a 30-year low. So some of these reforms have been proven to work, and we'd like to see them on a national level, like early warning systems to detect officers early on who may need some training or mentoring before it becomes a problem, looking at a national use of force standard that addresses things like we do in LA, like de-escalation, a duty to intercede, and rendering aid. So, yeah.
What changes, of course, I know you're not excited about this, but the city of LA is looking to cut $150 million from LAPD's budget. How would it impact?
Yeah, this is a good question, and it's something that I think the public deserves to know. When you start tinkering with the budget of the LAPD, even though on the onset it looks large, but even $150 million will have serious impacts, because the first place that we're going to go is we're going to slow or freeze hiring. And right now, the LAPD only hires to about its own attrition rate, so we're never adding to our ranks. And if you cut funding from us and delay recruit classes and hiring, it will create a domino effect, and you're looking at about a loss of almost 800 officers over the next 2 years. And with the World Cup and the Olympics coming, I don't think we can afford to do that. And we're going to have a very hard time meeting our 911 response times like we already do now. And it's going to take a long time to get through the investigations of crimes that are violent in nature, or even the property crimes. So there's a real impact to cutting our budget.
Let's talk about morale among LAPD officers right now. What are you hearing from those officers out on the streets, out on the line?
I'm hearing officers who are probably the most phenomenal officers in the country. They are by far the most professional that I've ever worked around. And they're beaten, and they're bruised, and they're down. I had one officer tell me that he feels like a Vietnam soldier returning home to a country that hates him. And that's not a good place to be. Having discussions, productive discussions about police reform are appropriate and needed, we think. But the vilification and the constant verbal battering of our profession has taken a huge toll on top of what they were expected to do with the protests and with COVID. So morale is low right now.
So how do you fix the morale when it comes to officers and also those in the community who say they just don't trust police officers, not just here in Los Angeles, but also across the country? What's the big fix?
I think the big fix is, for once, we need to start bringing stakeholders to the table who have actually demonstrated that they can achieve reform, and that you start bringing rank and file unions to the table. Because for too long, it's been politicians and retired chiefs, current chiefs, think tank attorneys who have really been trying to tackle the topic of police reform. And what's been missing in those conversations are the rank and file unions who are speaking on behalf of those officers. And like I said earlier, Los Angeles has been at the forefront of these reforms. I think we should be the beacon on the hill. Like I said, our officers are the most professional, and I think the rest of the nation could learn a lot and if they rose up to the level of reforms that we have here.
All right, thank you so much for joining us. Always good to have you on, and we hope we can have you back, of course, throughout the rest of the year. I'm sure this narrative won't go away too soon.
Conversations we need to have.